about this full moon in Aries in Bharani Nakshatra, which is happening early in the morning on November the 12th. So this is going to be a time to harmonize that energy from Libra, because we had the new moon was in Libra a couple weeks ago. Now we have the full moon in Aries. This is how energy works. These are the cosmic cycles that we're all grappling with in life. So we're going to be talking about that. Full moon in Aries in Bharani Nakshatra. So we're going to get down in it and talk about those things. Couple things just to let you know that's also going on. As you know, in the sky right now, we have this, we have this transit of Jupiter has just gone into Sagittarius. Again, this is a long-term transit that's going to be happening for a year, for the next year. And if you want to know what that transit means for you and others, you can avail yourself of my free web class. It's about an hour long. It's more than an hour long, where I talk about how that's going to impact you and all the different zodiac signs, because wherever that sign of Sagittarius is, it's going to be influencing you differently. It influences everyone differently. So go ahead, click on that link and register for the free web class if you haven't done it yet on Jupiter in Sagittarius, this transit for the next year. That'll really benefit you. I also talk about it historically, the last several times that Jupiter has gone through Sagittarius. Talk about the social and sort of political ramifications of that, and as well as the different nakshatras in Sagittarius. So all of these things are very important right now. But today the main focus is this, this full moon that is happening on, you see this shows November 12th at 4:30 a.m. And of course that's Pacific time, which is the time zone that I live in. So the whole world revolves around me, at least in my forecast, because it's too hard to keep the rest of it straight. So of course that 4:30 a.m., if you're in Europe, that's like, 11:30 in the morning. It's like the middle of the day. And in the East, of course, in India, whatnot, it's in the afternoon. So essentially it's the 12th of November. So, as you see, this, this is opposite the sun. And if we go back and look at the, if we move this back 2 weeks, right here. If we move this back 2 weeks, you'll see 2 weeks and a day. You'll see this is when we had the new moon, right? The new moon. It's 15 days. We have a 15-day what's called Paksha, or half of the lunar month, Solar lunar month. So sun and moon came together 15 days previous to that in Libra in Swati Nakshatra. I did a new moon forecast then, and it was actually Diwali. Remember, I did the whole thing about Diwali, Lord Rama. Remember that? 1,000 years ago, how long ago that was? Well, that was the new moon in Libra, in Swati, and it was the beginning of Diwali, where we have to intentionally light and illuminate our path. And the beautiful story in the Ramayana between Rama and Sita and Ravana and that story. So that was the new moon. And then 2 weeks later, we have to harmonize that energy of Libra, which is about yielding to another, compromise with others. And the halfway point in that cycle is Aries. And that's what we have with this full moon in Aries, right? So again, we're in the cycle of Libra, which is where we're trying to accommodate another person, yield to another person's wishes. It's about compromise. It's about respect and valuing and respecting another person's desires and wishes and needs equal to our own. That's what Libra is about, where we're always trying to harmonize and balance the needs of others with our own needs. And, we're always noticing how respected and appreciated we feel. I'm willing to compromise and give this up in order to make you happy, but then I want to also know that you appreciate it, that you appreciate my compromise and my sacrifice. And if we don't feel like it's appreciated, then we won't do it. And then there's a very strong Aries, Mars energy that comes out. So Venus and Mars are very much need to be balanced in the Libra Aries axis, right? These are the two energies, the forces that are being balanced and that are being harmonized. Venus and Mars, they're opposites. And so that's what we have now. That's what the full moon is about. Full moon is about this balancing act between Libra and Aries. So as we get to the full moon, of course, there'll be more of the Mars and Aries energy, right? Which is my needs are also important. So again, this is why I talk about the cycle, and this is why it's good to know of the cycles. Like I said at the beginning, when the cycle started in Libra, I explained this whole Libra energy, where it's about equality. It's not about selflessness or self-sacrifice. If it's about self-sacrifice, then when you get the full moon in Aries, you're going to be about me. And then it'll be anger and unbalanced, self-will and all that. So what needs to happen is we always need to be balancing and harmonizing these two things. First, we have to know ourselves and our values and those things that we should never compromise on, those no compromise zones, which are those qualities of Mars, those things that we, those things that we will never sacrifice or compromise on, and we shouldn't, because they're our core values. And only then can we accommodate another person and compromise with them from a place that feels good. You see, the problem often with Libra energy isn't that we can't compromise. In fact, it's the part of us that wants to and that enjoys it. It's that we compromise on things we shouldn't because we want the connection. Because we want to keep the connection with the person, we compromise on things that we shouldn't. And then over time, those compromises start to weigh on us because they weren't authentic. We didn't really, or we shouldn't really have compromised on that thing. Or we're sort of compromising and then dropping little hints, hoping that the person sort of gets that we're not really very happy. And we kind of nag a little bit and hope that they'll get it. And people don't get it. So this kind of, again, strange sort of balancing act is what often happens in the Libra Aries axis. So the full moon in Aries is a time when we'll be very full of that Aries energy. This is what the full moon is. The full moon is where our mind and heart is full of that thing. And it's full of Aries, which is no compromise. Aries is, it's about me. It's about me, what I want, and I'm ready to defend it and break connection in order to make sure that what I want is what is going on. Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a part of life where we follow our own path, right? And so, again, you can also say when we're in a supportive, partnership or whatever it would be, following our own path is fine. It's like, yeah, okay, that's just the way they are. It's just the way the person is. Now I'm going to go do my own thing. And the partner would be like, okay, go do your own thing. I'll do my own thing too. Because hopefully the partner also has a healthy sense of independence. Hopefully the partner also has healthy boundaries. Again, when someone has healthy boundaries, they're not making agreements that they are going to later resent. Again, that's the problem. When we make agreements that we then aren't really connected to our convictions. When that happens, we feel mistreated, and then we get angry at the other person. When something like a full moon in Aries comes, then we're going to get angry at the other person because we feel like it's the other person that made us slide on our principles when it's not. No one can make you slide on your principles. No one can make you do anything that you don't want to do. Your compromises and your agreements with other people are because of what you want. It's because you want the connection. It's because you want the connection to the person more than you want to hold the boundary or hold the conviction. That's why that's why you might slide on your principles at times. It's because you want the connection. And it's fine for us to do that sometime. Again, this is what relationships do. They extend us and make us go, it's not that big of a deal. I can give up this thing, or that thing's no big deal. But again, we have to make sure that it's sincere. And because we want the connection, we don't want to break the connection. We will compromise, but we need to make sure that it's authentic. So this full moon in Aries, very much full of our individuality, our inspired purpose. So it's really good for things like, if you're an entrepreneur or you're doing anything individual, like, trying to, like with myself, who is, basically self-employed. It's up to me to like go out there and, earn our living or do something. It's good for that because I'm, when the moon is in Aries, we're very much about following our own sort of inspired purpose and course and conviction. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm and passion towards what makes us excited about life, especially to express our unique self, right? And again, you can see how if there's too much of that in someone's life, then they're not considering other people, right? So when it's healthy, there's a healthy consideration of that. So this full moon in Aries is a really good time to be following your own path, your own course, sort of trailblazing your own course that day, getting out there and fighting the good fight. But of course, you have to be careful not to just be sort of pugnacious. Pugnacious is like the word for fighting, right? Very pugnacious. I wonder if it comes from pug, because the pug has the flat nose. We're getting hit in the nose. Pugnacious. You see fighters, they get punched in the nose, so they have a pug nose. But so this this pugnacious attitude is also possible, that you're in there fighting and battling with battling with others rather than compromising. So again, it'll be good for that. And again, when the moon is full, we're full of that intense nature, full of that enthusiasm, and it can be selfish if we're not paying attention to others. But again, when we have the full moon in Aries, it means that the sun is in Libra. So there's the possibility of that harmonization going on, right? So again, just understanding that this full moon in Aries is that halfway point in the Libra cycle. So we see here some people here. I'm sorry, there's like a delay in my comments for some reason. Leisha, this is Lisa, twice in one day. What a great day. So yeah, twice in one day. And Albert says, hello, Sam. Moon, Rahu, and Natal roll on the floor. Okay. So for some reason, I'm getting a delay in the comments here. So, I'll keep checking for the comments. And so anyway, but See if there's more in the. Oh, here, there's a whole bunch of them here that I'm not seeing. Let me look and see. Yeah, I see there's some nice comments here. Yeah, maybe Pug is named after Pugnacious. Yeah, that could be it. Maybe that's where Pugnacious is named after. Maybe Pug is named after Pugnacious. I see some other comments here. So this will be important to check in that halfway point in the transit, because you're in the Libra cycle, and now is the halfway point in that cycle. And so if you've been compromising too much and you feel like you've been trying to accommodate others and being, and feeling like, okay, well, I'm putting a lot of attention on others in this Libra cycle. Now I need to really get clear about my boundaries and whatnot. So it's good for that. It's good to really introspect and learn that, right? To really introspect and learn about the boundaries and things like that. And, of course, it's also, for those of you who don't know, this is also, I have a, you could see how this is going to affect you, because I do the full moon and the new moon forecasts, and the full moon and the new moon forecasts are for each of the 12 signs. So I let people know how this full moon in Aries will affect their sign as well, because it's going to be different. If you're a Leo, then this full moon in Aries is in your 9th house. If you're a, if you're Pisces, this full moon in Aries is in your 2nd house. So those things are very different. And when you join the Astrology Training Lab, this is one of the things I do. You get daily forecasts, and you also get me explaining these lunation cycles as they happen. Again, 2 weeks ago, I would have explained how Libra is happening in your, it's part of your 3rd house if you're Leo. So this full moon in Aries is your 9th house. Again, so you stay in contact with these universal cycles that are always happening. These are the cycles that are happening whether we know it or not. These are always what's going on. And, we often don't know that that's what's happening. We don't know why our life is being, governed the way it is. We just kind of getting knocked around. People don't have any idea that this is what's triggering them, both in a general sense with the Libra Aries, but also with the specific houses, because that's how each individual is going to feel it throughout the year. So now this is also in Bharani Nakshatra, and Bharani is ruled by Lord Yama. And Yama is, it literally, the word means restraint. And it shows where we feel restrained, we feel held back, we feel the sort of consequences of our actions, right? And those consequences are really shown by the first part of Aries, which is related to Ashwini, which has a lot of enthusiasm and energy. It's ruled by 2 horses, like charging forward. So that enthusiasm and drive of Aries produces a result. And it's those results that we feel in Bharani. And any result, say anything that you get that produces a result, now that result, that tangible thing is a restraint. It's going to restrain you in one way or another. Having something means that you now have to take care of it or maintain it or something. So that's why the symbol of Bharani Nakshatra is the womb or the reproductive cycle the reproductive system of a woman, like ovaries, uterus, womb, all of that, because that's the symbol of life being created, and not just in our imagination, but in reality. So the way I explain it is like, Aries is very much about that will, that self-will to create and to enthusiastically create something out of nothing. It's literally, Aries is like the sign of life being created. It's like the baby being born, something being born, and that enthusiasm and drive to give birth to something. Myself as an entrepreneur, or as someone who has created something, or that spirit of creativity is means that you actually produce something, and then you have to maintain it, and it creates a restriction, a restraint. So this nakshatra of Bharani is that feeling of being restrained, and the Lord is Yama, and Yama is the one who shows up at the time of death. Yama shows up at the time of death to take the soul to his final resting place, to take the soul on his final journey, wherever it's going. Yama shows up and he has a rope, and he throws the rope around and then takes you where you're going. So, it's often said that he's the god of death, and it's a kind of negative thing, where it's even sometimes related to, like, not the devil, but something taking you to where you're going to, taking you to the place where you're going to get punished. Like there's a punishment. And there is a sense of, there's a feeling of being punished or restrained with Bharani and with Lord Yama. Because wherever we're going after death, it can often feel like a punishment. It feels like a restraint. It feels like a restriction. So there's that feeling of heaviness that can be there in this nakshatra, and this feeling of consequences and being restrained by them. So again, there's this whole idea, careful what you wish for, because you might get it. And then there it is. Then it's there in your life, and you have to then maintain it, or you have to then, keep it alive or whatever. And so that feeling of that restriction and that sort of heaviness and things like that are related to Yama and to this nakshatra of Bharani. And, in a more democratic, or in a less judgmental way, we don't have to look at Yama as the thing that shows up at the end of our, physical death. We tend to take things too literally and not know how to interpret things metaphorically, which, it's not even that hard. Everything is in a process of birth and death. And so Aries is literally the sign of birth in all its forms. Things is always getting born. So anytime planets go through Aries, it's like a rebirth, right? And again, this is like the previous sign, Pisces, is like, it's kind of like a death, like a surrender, like a letting go. And then there's a rebirth, like in Aries. So this kind of birth-death cycle is always happening. And so, this even this process of something getting born is in many ways a kind of death of something else. Because again, you don't have infinite time and energy and attention. So these are the kinds of things that are these are big themes that are up in this Aries cycle right now. This nakshatra of Bharani has that quality. After the enthusiasm of Ashwini, the beginning of Aries, then there's the restriction of Bharani that says, okay, now you have to focus and concentrate your energy. And it's also the part of Aries that can feel like there can be a sort of cruelty here. There's a cruelty to Aries, this sign, right, ruled by Mars, and the cruelty of punishment and wanting to punish and feeling like people deserve to be punished or that kind of thing, where like, okay, well, you did it, now I'm going to do this, that we have to be careful of in Bharani. So we have to be careful of that entitlement and that feeling of punishment, that first of all, feeling like we're being punished and feeling like we deserve to punish others. You know, I've known a couple people that actually have Aries, that have planets in Bharani, and I've seen it several times. In fact, I know someone who they have a couple very important planets in Bharani. Of course, Bharani, the Nakshatra ruler that's associated with the Vimshotri Dasha is Venus. So you can see how Venus has this connection to the reproductive organs and things like that, and also like the desire and the sensuality and the passion that we would also see through Aries, and that passion that creates something. But I also know someone who, at a particular time, they when this nakshatra of Bharani was active through Venus Dasha, it was actually the subdasha, this person wound up teaching bondage, literally, like it's a like fetish sexual role play with ropes, literally with ropes. And again, it wasn't even really it wasn't even, you know, because there's a whole thing, you know, BDSM, you know, dominant submission, and like very, you know, like punishment kind of role play, which is also part of it, by the way. Sexuality, that kind of sexual play and sexuality also has quite a bit of energy in this nakshatra, in Aries and in Bharani, especially. This whole kind of punishment, consequences. I've seen this several times. This person I'm talking about is one example, but I've also seen in a couple examples of people that are very much into that kind of expression, either of their sexuality or just of in life, that have this feeling. But when this person's dasha cycle ran, it was like I think it was Mars. It was Mars Venus, and they had the Moon and Mercury, I think, in Bharani. And in their Mars Venus dasha, they started formally teaching this sacred, what did they call it? They called it, it was very powerful for them. It was like sacred bondage, and with ropes, and how couples, and like teaching couples how to tie each other up to learn greater trust and submission and play, like sexual play, through, you know, tying each other up, basically. But again, so it was very specific. So I tell you this just because this is a kind of, you know, it's remarkable how nakshatras show these kinds of things. And a really great study in nakshatras, like every time I bring students together and we go deep into nakshatras, there's all kinds of things like this that pop up. And you'll see it pop up when the thing that rule the nakshatras happen, and then you'll see planets in that nakshatra, and you'll see such a specific thing happen like that. So I don't say this because there's any, you know, that's necessarily going to happen, but it gives you an idea of what we're talking about, like that idea of what punishment might look like, or restraint. Literally, it's a restraint, and how it can be that sort of, it can take on that kind of energy or that sort of flavor or that kind of feeling. And how that feeling is also, it's not bad. Like we get into judgments so easily with things. And so even the restraint itself, that restraint and that thing that produces a result that can feel like a restraint is also very good, because we need restraint. We need restraints. We need restraints. And Aries energy especially needs a restraint, because Aries can just be wild, like a wild infant. Again, it's kind of like the infant sign, where we could be doing anything, right? So infants need discipline. They need to be restrained, right? So the first section of Aries, Ashwini, is just that kind of wild energy. But then the next one is Bharani, which says, okay, but it needs to be restrained. But in being restrained, we can feel like we're being punished, right? Kids, just look at the example. Children, they don't want restraint, any kind of restraint, even like, okay, put the knives and the machine gun away. And the child will start screaming crazy because they don't understand. Look, I have to, my mommy has to take the knife away from me because I might kill myself. It doesn't matter. To the child, it feels bad, feels like a punishment. So you want to really take the energy of these things to a deeper level. And so I'm reading some of the comments. They're not coming through on my original screen here, so I'm reading them from somewhere else, and I'm seeing. I'll answer a few questions. We see here some of it's just a lot of just conversation. So looks like Angela has Bharani Lagna. Okay. So Angela, can you relate to that feeling of being punished, feeling of being restrained, wanting to be kind of unrestrained, right? Because that's Aries. So you want to feel unrestrained and just kind of free to kind of go anywhere, and then feeling like restrictions and restraints are like make you want to rebel against them, even though you need them. Again, Aries needs some restraints, and it's very good in that sense. Someone's asking about how will the full moon be for people with sun in Aries and moon in Aries? Well, it's the full moon on those planets. That's what it means. So again, if you can ask the question, think about it instead of just ask me as if you have no idea what anything means. So try to use your brain a little bit and think for yourself and maybe offer an explanation and then ask me if that's okay. But it's usually very sensible. See, this is what people do. They learn things and then they act like they don't know anything. And then they ask me, what's it like for someone who Well, what it's like is that those things are being influenced. So if you know enough to ask the question, you know enough to at least try to offer an explanation. But it's all pretty common sense what it means. And so someone has Venus in Bharani. I create all the time. Yeah, it's a very creative nakshatra. Angela says, I hate restraint. Yeah, I get it. You hate it. Hate it. You want to just be a wild animal. But you need it too, right? Because you need restraint. And you need those restraints to make you concentrate. And I've seen where you ask a lot of questions and sometimes it's very undisciplined. But then when someone does throw a restraint or discipline at you and go, do this, and you do it, then you get a lot out of it. And I've seen this with you, Angela Sanchez, because you've I've seen with you, Angela Sanchez, that when you're asked to, when you're given a restraint, you respond to it very well. And it helps you focus and concentrate. So, I'm going to just kind of leave it at that. Usually my comments come through on this screen that I'm looking at. Like for example, here it says, Angela says, yes, what Albert said. I think it was in regard to this. Albert said, I've honestly learned so much from you over the 10 years. Thank you. So you're both very much welcome. I don't know when these comments were made, because again, usually they come through on the back end of my screen and they're not. So then I open up another browser and then it kind of makes it freeze a little bit. So a little bit of technical details. Mercury retrograde. See, Mercury retrograde, a little technological thing here, little technology going on, which we can see in the chart because Mercury is retrograde here in this part. So this is part of the full moon as well. The last thing that I wanted to talk about though was was these changes that happen, and especially that Mars moves into Libra, and we get this exchange with Venus, and then Mercury retrograde is also here. I spoke about these things in the November forecast. Go back and watch the November forecast. Remember, I said November 11th and 12th or something like that. I talked about how these were going to be some major days of, all kinds of crazy stuff happening. Remember, I think I said that those days, because now we get Venus and Mars exchanging, right? Again, which brings a lot of that sort of engagement and interaction between that Venus and Scorpio and Mars and Libra, that sort of intense dynamic. And Mercury retrograde also in there, sort of confusing things, right? So all that on the full moon. So again, you have to be careful of miscommunication, communication problems, maybe getting your feelings hurt, and then getting all excited and intense and having problems. So those are the kinds of things that we have to be careful of. Also with this, with this Mercury retrograde join Mars, who is the ruler of the full moon. So again, this Mars and Libra, there's definitely a potential as we get closer to this full moon for some blow-ups in your relationships and things like that. Again, notice how, that feeling, like feeling punished and feeling restrained and held back. And also be honest about how good it is for you to be restrained at times, even though you might not like it, especially if you're Aries. It's hard for Aries. It's hard for Aries to bear it. Again, that's what Bharani comes from. Bear it. I have to bear it. We have to bear this restriction. And bearing it feels like punishment. Like, I don't want any boundaries. I don't want to have to bear. I don't want anything to restrain me. I want to be unrestrained and totally. That's what Aries feels in its mind, and then they fight against that. But again, this is one of the struggles of Aries, is to learn how to accept restraints without feeling like they're being punished and then wanting to punish others. This is definitely one of the reasons why Aries can be quite a vindictive sign if it's not careful, particularly in the Bharani section. Is that kind of like someone deserves punishment. I'm pretty sure if it was I'm looking here at the I thought I had Hitler's chart up here, that Hitler had I'm not seeing it here though, was doing some I don't see it here. I'm pretty sure Hitler had a lot of those planets were in Bharani. This is why there was so much of that need or that desire to punish. So anyway, we'll leave it at that. And again, if you're interested in seeing how these things will affect you, you can try the Astrology Training Lab as well. And again, I also put a link here to the Sagittarius free class, because again, Jupiter in Sagittarius is also happening now, and that should be something that everybody should check out because it's really important to us now. So we'll leave it at that.